Atlus is in a brand new era. Ever since the release of Persona 4 Golden on Steam, it's been pretty obvious to them that they have a fanbase in other places. And with the release of Persona 5 Royal and the other two modern Persona games on all major platforms, it's pretty clear and apparent that they know that their fanbase is in other places now. But with that new audience comes new expectations and new changes that I think they need to make for the future. And the primary one I'm looking at is the story expansion DLC.
Persona 5 Royal!
Persona 5 Royal is without a doubt Atlus's biggest release in the last decade. Persona 5 itself has pushed Atlus out of being just a simple niche JRPG company, and they are now well known as the Persona company.
RPG from the creators of Persona 3, 4, and 5.
This, in no small part, is also thanks to the collaborations they've had and Joker being added to Smash. But we have to remember what Royal is. It's a non-DLC expansion of a $60 game that you had to pay $60 for a second time to play. Well, unless you waited for it, but that's different. And it's obvious that in today's day and age, that kind of practice is usually only referenced as one word, which is scummy. This brings up my own thoughts about Atlus potentially moving away from these kinds of expansions, and instead focusing on what the rest of the industry is focused on, which is story expansion DLC.
Just why did you need me for this?
I cannot imagine playing P5 without Royal, and I don't imagine I will play vanilla P5 again. But the reality is that most of Royal, if not all of it, could have probably been DLC in some way. We've seen updates and DLC rework entire games. It's not completely out of the question. I think that while this worked for P5, that game was originally only on one platform. The audience was small despite millions of people wanting to play it on other platforms, and ultimately that means that the damage was probably minuscule with the release of Royal. Also, some of us were so obsessed with P5 that we'd buy the game a second time in a heartbeat, no questions asked. But Atlus has more of a global audience now, and it's no mistake they've been releasing their games on multiple platforms consistently. Persona 5 Tactica on all major platforms. Persona 3 Reload on all major platforms, except Switch. Metaphor ReFantazio, all major platforms. The direction is consistent and very unsurprising after watching them launch all of their modern Persona games on them as well. But what I'm trying to get at here is that I think Atlus knows they will lose a lot of good faith if they continue this re-release pattern. People will stop buying the first versions of their game and just wait for the second version, and if that second version never comes, they can buy the first one for dirt cheap. The reality kind of needs to set in that people like story DLC expansions. In fact, it's probably the only kind of DLC people view as acceptable.
Seems like this kind of thing has a habit of sticking around despite our expectations.
And DLC is Atlus's middle name. Almost every game they release has some form of cosmetic DLC, and that's no mistake. It's because that stuff works. The truth is DLC is a normal thing in the modern age, and story DLC even more so. And Atlus hasn't done a lot of story DLC, especially not post-release, but they're not a stranger to it either. And I do think this needs to be the direction of any story expansions going forward. If you're gonna make me replay a game I'd already played, I'd rather not spend $60 for it again. I guess the problem here is that I will. But regardless of whether I would or not, I don't think this would sit well with most people today. That also being further complicated by the fact that Atlus is selling their games for $70 now. And it really sounds like I'm trying to say, Atlus, please don't make me spend $70 twice, even though I will. But I really just don't think that it's a favorable outlook to resell your game twice as your audience grows bigger and bigger, because more people are going to come into it, more mainstream media, more mainstream people, they're going to see that, they're not going to like that practice because they already don't. And Atlus has really slept on the potential of DLC in the past, too. Both Persona 5 Dancing Star Night and Persona 5 Strikers could have easily benefited from some story expansions. Or at least Dancing could have gotten additional social links and additional dances with the Strikers songs. Strikers, on the other hand, could have had a Where Were Akechi and Kasumi kind of episode as DLC. I don't know, it's just kind of a neat idea. I don't know if it would have worked or if it would have made sense, but you could have had that implemented into there. My point is that story DLC is big and people love it. Whereas re-releasing your game a second time with new content and expansions, but not letting the people who had the game already play it, not really something that's too big on the market, and I don't really think it's ever been that popular of a thing to do.
What do you think? Does it suit me?
The reality is that pretty much the whole industry has moved on from this kind of practice of reselling their game with new content, and has moved into more story DLC expansions. To me, I think it would be better to do story DLC expansions and then maybe release a complete edition of your game down the line. I don't know how it would look on their financials versus them releasing Persona 3 Reload and then another Persona 3 Reload for $70 with the answer attached to it, instead of just releasing it as DLC. But I think it would do a lot of goodwill on their reputation to shift to making story DLC as opposed to re-releasing their game a second time for $70 again. But I'm not a financial analyst, I'm not a businessman, I'm just some guy who likes to play video games. So why don't you tell me what you think Atlus should do, or what you think they will do? Do you think they'll shift off of releasing their games second times with expansions and move to story DLC, or do you think they'll just continue until it's clear that it doesn't work anymore? You can let me know down in the comments below. As always, leave a like if you enjoyed the video, and subscribe to the channel for more things JRPG, Atlus, and Persona related. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Oh my god, that did so much damage.